right here. Coming in at number 10, we have the 2004 Indian Ocean Tsunami. This event is known by the scientific community as Sumatra Andaman earthquake, and it took place during Christmas time on Christmas and on Boxing Day. It was caused when the Indian plate was subducted by the Burma plate, and it triggered a series of devastating tsunamis. It affected 14 countries, killing over 230,000 people. These waves were sent over 100 feet in the air. Indonesia was the country that was hit the hardest, followed by Sri Lanka, India, and Thailand. So the magnitude was 9.1 to a 9.3, making it the third largest earthquake ever recorded on a seismograph. This earthquake made the whole planet vibrate, so the devastating construction cost to rebuild everything that was damaged was in the billions. Everything was destroyed. The worldwide community was able to raise more than $14 billion in humanitarian aid. Okay, moving on to the number 9 spot. Now we're talking about the 1970 Ebola cyclone. It was a very devastating tropical cyclone, which struck East Pakistan that is now Bangladesh. It remains the deadliest tropical cyclone ever recorded, and definitely one of the deadliest cyclones in modern times. Up to 500,000 people lost their lives, and the damages was estimated to be about $86.4 million. And when you think about it, back in the 70s, that's a whole lot. The country Tasmanian actually lost 45% of its total population. The hurricane reached a category 3 with winds of up to 185 kilometers an hour. Okay, so you probably remember this one because it happened not too long ago. And I'm talking about the Haiti earthquake that happened in 2010. And this comes in at number. The main area that was hit was Dominican Republic, and the earthquake turned into a tsunami that killed about 100 to 316,000 people. And it was estimated 3 million people were affected by the earthquake. Many of them lost their homes, their jobs. Within the first 9 hours, there was a total of 32 aftershocks. That was a record. And the magnitudes of those aftershocks was about a 4.2. The initial catastrophic magnitude was a 7. There was nearly $4.5 billion pledged worldwide.
Moving on to the Helena slump. A great danger is posed by the possible collapse of the southern portion of Kilauea volcano on the Big Island of Hawaii. The south slope is geologically unstable. Called the Helena slump, this could drop 12,000 cubic kilometers of rock into the Pacific Ocean, generating a mega tsunami that would go around the Pacific Ocean and reach the western seaboard of North America in a matter of hours, overpowering coastal communities. There is evidence that a similar collapse of the nearby Mauna Loa around 12,000 years ago generated a tsunami with a run-up height of over 400 meters. Now, even as recently as 1975, movement of the Helena slump generated a smaller yet destructive tsunami that reached California. Given that the slump is continually active and moving, it might only take a jolt from an earthquake in the tectonically active state to set in motion this catastrophic chain of events. Now, the scary thing is that we can't do anything to stop it, and this threat will be looming over us. Now let's discuss gamma ray bursts. Gamma rays are the most dangerous forms of radiation. Gamma ray bursts likely result from the merging of two dying stars and can travel through almost anything, so that is not good for us humans. The event generates powerful beams of energy, firing charged particles into space in a spectacular surge of light. Now, if Earth were to be in the path of a gamma ray burst, radiation would destroy our atmosphere and produce nitrogen oxides, a gas that would eradicate the ozone layer. Without the ozone layer, the sun's ultraviolet rays would reach the surface unimpeded, wiping out the plankton in the ocean that produces oxygen to the atmosphere and disrupting the food chain, while causing other serious effects such as skin cancer. Presently, mechanisms for this generation of gamma ray burst emissions are not fully understood, so we just have to hope that one strong enough doesn't wipe us out. Now we have the San Andreas Fault. The San Andreas Fault is a continental right lateral strike slip transform fault that extends roughly 750 miles through the Californias. It forms the tectonic boundary between the Pacific Plate and the North American Plate. Now, a study found that the risk of a large earthquake here may be increasing more rapidly than scientists had previously believed. The risk is currently concentrated on the southern section of the fault, aka the region around Los Angeles, because strong earthquakes have occurred relatively recently on the central 1857 and northern 1906 segments of the fault, while the southern section has not seen any similar rupture for at least 300 years. Now, if or when it ruptures, it would be strongly felt and potentially cause significant damage throughout much of Southern California. All the data suggests that the fault is ready for the next big earthquake, but exactly when the triggering will happen and when the earthquake will occur is unknown, which is one of the scariest parts. Now we have the North Sea tsunami. The North Sea may seem an unlikely place for a devastating tsunami, but climate change has led to concern that a submarine landslide in the region might lead to just this. Scientists have suggested that over 6,000 years ago, a sharp sea level rise attributed to a changing climate and the rapid melting of ice, and it added weight to the submarine glacial deposits at the edge of the Norwegian continental shelf, destabilizing them and causing a 300-kilometer long landslide. This generated a tsunami that reached heights of up to 20 meters in the Shetland Islands, 10 in the Norwegian coast, and 6 meters off the northern and western coast of Scotland. Now, should Earth experience such rapidly warming climate again, and experience the associated melting of the Greenland and/or West Antarctic ice sheets, a similar event might as well be possible, which today would affect the coastal populations of Scotland and Norway and perhaps even London. Onto the Cascaden Big One. At the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, just off the west coast of North America, and running from Northern California to Vancouver Island, is a subduction zone, a place where the Pacific Ocean floor is being forced beneath the North American landmass. Now, the rate of movement of the ocean floor here is currently just 40 millimeters a year, but the upper part of the system is currently stuck, meaning that the North American plate is being compressed. At some point, the pressure being built up has to be released, and this will be in the form of a massive earthquake, perhaps up to a magnitude of 9. This could cause a collapse of the coastal region of up to 2 meters and a possible horizontal displacement of 30 meters. Now, shortly after the intense shaking subsides, the coastal community will be struck by a tsunami that can make the 2011 Japanese wave look small. Around 7 million people live in this region, from Vancouver through Seattle to Tacoma and Portland. Scientists have calculated that in the last 10,000 years, the region has suffered 41 large earthquakes, occurring with an average interval of 244 years, and the last was a magnitude 9, and that was 315 years ago, so this could happen at any time. Next up is that an asteroid hits Earth. On February 15, 2013, a fireball streaked across the sky over Russia and exploded in a window-shattering airburst. Now, it was nearly a disaster, as a ground strike may have ended the lives of tens of thousands of people. Hours after the event, a space rock 3 times larger threaded the space between Earth and its artificial satellites. Now, had this asteroid struck a densely populated location like New York, it would have destroyed Midtown instantly, blasted down surrounding skyscrapers, and rained firestorm-spawning meteors for hours. Now, short-term death tolls might have reached the millions. Now, of course, water covers 71% of Earth, and many large inland regions remain sparsely populated. Thus, in the rare case such a massive rock actually hit Earth, it would stand a small chance of striking a population center. But a nation wrecker or even a planet killer could come knocking someday, perhaps sooner than we'd like to think. Now we have a megathrust earthquake. On April 1st, 2014, a magnitude 8.2 earthquake occurred 97 kilometers off the northwest coast of Chile, causing landslides and a tsunami to hit the coast. This earthquake created the possibility for an even larger earthquake for Chile in the near future due to the location of the earthquake. Now, the earthquake originated from the subduction zone, where one tectonic plate, the Nazca Plate, is plunging underneath another, the South American Plate. This subduction zone lies within the Ring of Fire, an arc in the Pacific containing 75% of the world's active volcanoes, which causes many of the world's seismic activity. When a tectonic plate moves under another, faults can come under severe amounts of stress, and any release of tension causes seismic activity, namely earthquakes. Now, the April 2014 earthquake was a megathrust earthquake, or a major earthquake caused by the release of tension from a subduction zone. Now, it only relieved 33% of the tension on the faults, leaving the rest to be relieved in the near future. And last on our list is black holes. Our galaxy is full of black holes, dozens of miles wide. Their gravity is so strong they swallow everything. Now, based on such observations and even more theoretical arguments, researchers guesstimate there are about 10 million black holes in the Milky Way. Now, if a normal star were moving towards us, we'd know it, but with a black hole, there is little warning. Assuming that black holes are randomly distributed throughout the galaxy and that there really are a few hundred million of them present, this likely means that the closest black hole to Earth is only around 40 to 80 light years away. Now, if a black hole contacts the Earth, of course it will swallow us. But we don't need to be swallowed in order to suffer catastrophic consequences. If a black hole simply passes very close by the Earth, it would cause what's known as a tidal disruption event, an event where the black hole's gravitational influence on the closer side of the Earth is so much stronger than the farther side of the Earth that it actually begins ripping our planet apart. Similarly, the top side of Earth would be pulled down relative to the center, while the bottom side gets pulled upward. What I'm pretty much saying is the gravitational and atomic bonds holding Earth together could be shattered, transforming our planet from a solid sphere into a thin, stretched debris stream that looks like a piece of spaghetti. Now, in fact, astronomers have named this exact process spaghettification because of the stretching effects that black holes have.
Starting us off in the number 10 spot is Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Beginning April 20th, 2010, the Gulf of Mexico was hit by the largest marine oil spill in history. This infamous oil spill, sometimes referred to as the Gulf of Mexico oil spill, all began with the Deepwater Horizon oil rig that was essentially a floating platform that was drilling an exploratory well about 18,000 feet deep. However, the disaster struck when the methane gas from the underwater well expanded, blasting through a recently installed concrete core and eventually rising into the drilling rig where it ignited and exploded. The explosion quickly engulfed the drilling platform, taking the lives of 11 workers and forcing the remaining 94 to evacuate. And after just 2 days, the entire rig had sunk. From that point forward, with every passing moment, oil was seeping into the ocean, causing complete environmental devastation. And although BP, the oil company, had attempted to halt the leak with remote-controlled underwater vehicles, the oil continued to flow for another 87 days. It's estimated that about 210 million gallons of oil were leaked from the underwater well, affecting nearly 70,000 square miles of ocean. This disaster not only wreaked environmental havoc, but also resulted in major criminal lawsuits for higher-ups in the company. Next up at number 9, Huascan avalanche. What's scary about earthquakes is not only how much damage they themselves can do depending on the magnitude, but what else they can cause depending on where it happens. And what happens when an earthquake happens near the highest mountain in Peru? Unfortunately, the deadliest landslide in the country's history. On May 31st, 1970, a 7.9 magnitude earthquake emanated from about 35 kilometers from Mount Huascarán, tragically causing a massive landslide along the mountain. It's estimated that the avalanche sped down the mountain at about 160 kilometers an hour, picking up ice, rocks, and even a giant 700-ton boulder, along with other debris, eventually crashing down at the base of the mountain and burying the surrounding towns. The tragic day resulted in taking the lives of roughly 70,000 people and remains one of the worst disasters the country has faced. Coming in at number 8, Sichuan earthquake. Back in 2008, the mountainous region of Sichuan province in southwestern China faced one of the worst earthquakes in history. Caused by the collision of the Indian, Australian, and Eurasian plates, a huge 7.9 magnitude earthquake erupted, completely destroying roughly 80% of buildings in the affected area. The magnitude was astronomical. Not only did houses, businesses, and schools crumble to the ground, but entire villages and towns were destroyed from the disaster. Plus, if the devastation from that weren't enough, the quake caused multiple landslides, which created about 830 makeshift dams across the region, coincidentally causing widespread flooding, which was then only exacerbated by heavy rainfall. According to the final government assessment, nearly 90,000 people were counted as either dead, missing, or presumed dead. dead. On top of that, an estimated 375,000 were left with serious injuries. But even those who survived the disaster, with or without injury, were greatly affected, as millions of citizens were now homeless, without food, and many without family.
Up next, in the 7th spot, we're talking about the 2005 Hurricane Katrina. This was the 11th named storm and the 5th hurricane of 2005. This became the deadliest hurricane of the United States of America, and at this time, George W. Bush was in office. Many lost their lives on this day, most of them from Louisiana, with about 1,577, and the damage was about $108 billion, which makes this the costliest hurricane to hit the Atlantic ever. So Hurricane Katrina was a Category 5, the highest rating. It affected places like the Bahamas, South Florida, Cuba, Louisiana, New Orleans, and that's just to name a few places. The 1976 tungsten earthquake that took place in China moves in to the number 6 spot. This is believed to be the biggest earthquake of the 20th century according to the death toll. The number of deaths initially reported by the government was 655,000, but the numbers were reduced. And since then, the new numbers is about 240 to 255,000. And there was another report that actually said that the death toll could be higher. So as of right now, what we know is the numbers is unknown, but what we do know is the magnitude of this was an 8.2, followed by a 7.1 magnitude aftershock, which happened about 16 hours later. And at the 5th spot, we have the Indian cyclone, which took place November 25th, 1839. And it hit the village of Korninga, which is located in India. The cyclone triggered a 40-foot wave that destroyed much of the village and the ships around it. And it drowned about 20,000 people at sea. An estimated total of over 300,000 people lost their lives. The port was destroyed and was never fully rebuilt. Korninga today, if you were to look at it, it just remains a simple village. Now at number 4, I'm talking about the Shaanxi earthquake. And it occurred January 23rd, 1556, making this the oldest natural disaster on this top 10 list. The Shaanxi province is located in northern China. The catastrophic earthquake has an estimated magnitude of 8 and killed approximately 830,000 people. The death toll has been believed to reduce the population of its province by 60%. And this is because the earthquake struck right in the middle of a densely populated area where the construction is very poor. The earthquake also triggered landslides, which caused an 840 kilometer wide area to be completely covered. Moving on to number 3, we have the 1887 Yellow River flood. This is a very devastating flood on the Yellow River in China. This river is prone to flooding due to the elevated nature of the river. There was even another huge flood in 1931, in 1938, and of course again in 1958. 1958 being the last time though. The flood took the lives of around 900,000 people. It left 2 million people homeless. In 1931, the Yellow River consumed the lives of about 4 million people total. But now with the technology, we are able to control the river and use it as hydroelectric power dams. Okay, we are almost at the number 1 spot, but coming in at number, we have the 1931 China flood, and this is another one. It was a series of floods that took place over a couple of months that spanned across the whole country. The floods killed between 1 and 4 million people, making it the deadliest natural disaster according to the death toll. And it has such a wide range in casualties because in the 30s, China didn't keep a record of the death toll, and if they did, it probably would have been washed away anyways. Alright, let's get into the number 1 spot. We have finally made it here. And I'm talking about the deadliest drought. From 1876 to 1879, China recorded the deadliest drought in history, making it the worst natural disasters of all time. It did not rain consecutively for 3 years, and the river ran dry, killing crops and livestock. Over 9 provinces were affected by the lack of food production, and the drought ended up killing over 9 million people. In June of 1879, heavy rains began to fall in much of the famine area, and with the harvest that fall, the worst of the famine was over. However, many rural areas have been depopulated by starvation, diseases, and the migration of people to the urban areas.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot today, we have the Yellowstone National Park supervolcano. Yellowstone Yellowstone National Park is located in the western United States and is a beautiful park with lakes and canyons and mountain ranges. While the word supervolcano sounds very cool, it is actually a pretty terrifying concept, and Yellowstone National Park sits right on top of one. If this volcano wasn't currently active, it would be no big deal, but that is not the case here. The last time the volcano erupted was 630,000 years ago, which I know is a very long time, but the scientists who study volcanoes have discovered that this supervolcano erupts every 600 to 700,000 years. This means that it really could just decide to erupt any day from today to long after we're all dead. I sure am hoping for the latter. The eruption of this volcano could end human civilization, so let's hope that it can hold out to that 700,000 year mark so we don't have anything to worry about. Moving on to number 9, we have the Helena Slump. This unstable slope is located just south of Hawaii's biggest island, and every so often it creates a landslide that is the cause of tsunamis. There is evidence that around 120,000 years ago, there was a really large landslide on the slope that caused a tsunami over 400 meters high. The most recent tsunami caused by the slump was in 1975, and it managed to reach all the way to California. The slump could potentially drop 12,000 cubic meters of rock into the Pacific Ocean, which would create a mega tsunami that would travel through the Pacific Ocean and even reach the western seaboard in just a few hours. This would totally ruin any coastal communities. While scientists are pretty sure we have a while until there's a landslide on the slope so big that it generates a mega tsunami, the Earth is always changing, and all it would take would be a strong jolt from an earthquake, so we never really know. Moving on down to number 8, we have heat waves. While I enjoy a nice hot summer day, there certainly is a limit. Because of climate change, we are facing changes in temperatures that could be detrimental. Heat waves are becoming increasingly more common, and if greenhouse gas emissions aren't significantly decreased, we'll keep seeing these temperature changes. There are many threats that extreme heat poses, but it is also one of the leading causes of weather-related deaths. Some other threats include wildfires, threats to agriculture and livestock, and it can even lower the ability of power transmission lines, which could potentially lead to unreliable electricity. Even just a few degrees is cause for concern, so maybe it is time we change our ways and get the big corporations who are responsible for the majority of our emissions on board to drive us towards a brighter and cooler future.
Coming in at number 7, mercury poison. In 1908, the Shiso Corporation opened its doors in Minamata City, Japan. For years they were a fertilizer company, however they eventually expanded to include chemical production, eventually becoming the most advanced in the country both before and after World War II. In 1932, the Shiso factory started acetaldehyde production, making 210 tons that year alone. And for over 30 years, between 1932 to 1968, the Shiso Corporation released their wastewater into the bay off Minamata City, not thinking anything of the environmental impact it could have on fisheries or their community. Now, I won't get into the chemistry too deep, but essentially a side reaction of creating this compound led to a very small percentage of methyl mercury, and this mercury was dumped into the bay along with the other wastewater, year after year after year. Over time, it infected the fish in the bay, which were then eaten by the public, and slowly but surely, the citizens of Minamata began contracting severe mercury poisoning. In 1956, the first victim of the disease was discovered, and after that, an epidemic of infection began. After all was said and done, there were roughly 3,000 certified victims of the poisoning, as well as another 10,000 who were compensated after several hefty lawsuits took place. So, although it may not have directly killed the most people, it caused an absolute pandemic, ruining the lives of thousands. Coming in at number 6, Mount Tambora eruption. Back in the year 1816, the world was faced with an incredibly strange occurrence. There was no summer. Countries all over the world, including tropical ones, were reporting incredibly low temperatures, and places like New York were facing snowstorms and frost in July. While at the time no one quite knew what happened, evidence has since suggested that it all had to do with an erupting volcano the year before. But of course, this was not just any earthquake. The legendary eruption occurred April 10th, 1815 at at the Mount Tambora volcano in Indonesia and remains the most powerful volcanic eruption in human history. According to NASA, 150 cubic kilometers of exploded rock flew into the air and would have been visible from about 1,300 kilometers away. But from this giant explosion came so much volcanic ash that it actually reduced the amount of sunlight that could reach the Earth's surface, and from there the temperature in the northern hemisphere dropped 1 degree Fahrenheit. Now, 1 degree might not sound like much, but it was enough to completely overhaul the climate for an entire year. Not only that, but the eruption itself caused roughly 11,000 deaths on site, followed by about 100,000 famine-related deaths for the following year due to crop shortages. Coming in at number 5, the Great Galveston Hurricane. Once upon a time, the small island of Galveston, just off the coast of Texas, was the grandest city in the entire state. It had the biggest port, the most wealth, swanky mansions, and even some of the first telephones and electric lights. However, after one fateful storm on September 8, 1900, the small island city would never be the same. The day began like any other, and although they had received limited news about a storm brewing near the Gulf of Mexico, they didn't think too much of it. Then around 11 a.m. they received a report that the storm was getting worse and the waters were very rough. But still, without the technology we have now, there was no way of knowing what was coming. Finally, around 3 p.m., 2 men ran into town from the beach shouting that the Gulf was looking like a 50-foot tall wall and something bad was headed straight for the island. Shortly after, the storm hit Galveston, the hurricane sweeping in at a whopping 225 kilometers an hour, paired with 6-foot waves crashing into buildings, sweeping away citizens, animals, and everything in sight. According to those who survived the fateful day, the storm went on for hours, not subsiding until the early hours of the next morning, just in time to see the wreckage in broad daylight. The carnage was insurmountable. Not only were roughly 3,600 houses and 600 businesses reduced to nothing but rubble, leaving thousands of citizens without shelter, but between 6,000 to 8,000 people perished during the disaster as well. Their bodies left mangled in the streets for their loved ones to try and identify. To this day, it remains the worst hurricane in US history. Coming in at number 4, the Indian Ocean tsunami. Almost 20 years ago, on December 26, 2004, a catastrophic magnitude 9.1 earthquake struck the undersea off the west coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. Now, as far as earthquakes go, that is almost as bad as it gets. In fact, since 1900, this event is considered the 3rd largest earthquake worldwide. From the time the quake began at 8 a.m. in Indonesia, there was only about 15 minutes before the speeding waves hit land, giving residents very little time to flee to higher ground and try and save themselves or their family. The deadly waves then continued for another 7 hours, devastating not only the nearby coastal areas, but even managed to reach as far as East Africa. Waves of up to 100 feet were crashing down, traveling as fast as 800 kilometers an hour and swallowing everything in its path. The final estimated death toll was 230,000. However, another 2 million people in 14 different South Asian countries, as well as some East African countries, were left completely displaced. To date, this tsunami has taken the lives of more people than any other recorded tsunami in history. Coming in at number 3, the Bola cyclone. On November 12, 1970, an unexpected and deadly storm struck what was at the time called East Pakistan, now known as the region of Bangladesh. The Bola cyclone formed over the Bay of Bengal from the remnants of Tropical Storm Nora. And Nora had spent 2 days over the South China Sea before beginning to intensify and move north towards East Pakistan. Before the storm arrived on land, the surrounding areas were inundated with flooding. Then on the day, the cyclone struck India and Bangladesh with wind speeds of around 185 kilometers an hour, absolutely decimating everything in its path. And tragically, either due to the lack of notice from the Indian Weather Service or not enough understanding of the cyclone's intensity, a proper evacuation plan was not put in place, and around 500,000 lives were lost to the disaster. disaster. However, as you can imagine, the issues didn't stop there. In the aftermath of the tragedy, there was a lot of back and forth and blame placed for not providing proper preparations, many criticizing the government's slow response to the aftermath. Then later that year, as a kind of revolt against the current government, a new opposition party ended up winning in general elections in East Pakistan, something that was completely ignored by West Pakistan. And ultimately, this led to the Bangladesh Liberation War in 1971 and the creation as an independent nation in 1972. Coming in at number 2, the Yellow River floods. The second largest river that runs through China is the Huanghe River, or the Yellow River, and there have been 3 major floods recorded that collectively are considered to be the worst floods in history, as well as some of the most destructive natural disasters ever recorded. The first happened in 1887, when the strategically placed dikes and dams filled with silt, gradually raising the water levels near the lowlands. Then, after a heavy rainfall, the river began to overflow and quickly resulted in the death of somewhere between 900,000 and 2 million citizens, as well as causing mass famine and homelessness across the surrounding areas. Then, several years later, in 1931, the river flooded again. This time, about 88,000 square kilometers of land became completely immersed in water, leaving 80 million people without their homes and killing an estimated 4 million. However, although the second is recorded as the worst flood, the most tragic was the last of these floods in 1938. Between 1937 to 1945, China and Japan were at war with each other in what is now referred to as the Sino-Japanese War. I won't get into all the nitty-gritty details, but essentially during this time, the Chinese were in a full-on resistance against the Japanese, who were attempting to advance their influence in the territory. And unlike the first two, the 1938 flood was intentional. Due to the advancements of the invading Japanese troops during the war, Chinese nationalists, under the force of their leader Chiang Kai-shek, destroyed the protective dams and dikes holding the river at bay, thus causing another catastrophic flood. The 1938 flood killed between 500,000 to 900,000 people, some of whom were soldiers, but many of which were their own civilians. Pretty much anyone that did survive was left as a refugee, their farmlands and homes destroyed by the flood, and resulted in an overall anger and distrust towards their government that took decades to heal. And last up today in our number 1 spot, the Bhopal disaster. On December 3rd, 1984, the city of Bhopal, India was overrun by a catastrophic 45-ton gas leak from the Union Carbide insecticide plant. The leak began in the early hours of the morning, around midnight or so, and was only made worse when the public siren was shut off around 1:30 so as not to alarm the citizens over what, at the time, was believed to be an insignificant leak. To top it off, there was little to no communication between the plant, the Bhopal authorities, and the hospital workers, so no one was properly prepared when things got really bad. A mere hour and a half later, the public siren began wailing, this time for real, as it became evident that there was indeed a huge problem. Many were still asleep as it was around 3 in the morning, and so once the deadly gas reached the nearby towns, more than 3,000 citizens died instantly. However, the tragedy did not end there. The death toll continued to rise, climbing up to nearly 20,000 victims, and another 500,000 faced injuries such as respiratory failures and blindness. Even worse is that after the initial incident, the leak was reported not to have been dealt with properly, and so 300 metric tons of waste remained at the site for decades, contaminating drinking water and causing widespread chronic health problems, birth defects, and fertility issues for citizens until as recently as 2016. On a good note, as of 2004, the government is required to provide clean water to the residents due to the contamination in the groundwater, and in 2010, 7 former employees of the plant were convicted of negligence related to the incident. But nothing will ever change the fact that a gas leak was hidden from the public and killed thousands in their sleep.
Well, starting off this list, number 10, extreme wildfires.
This is what the firefight looks like overnight in the hills outside Los Angeles. A dangerous storm of hot embers raining down on crews as they walk a gauntlet of fire.
Okay, we all know that unfortunately California is no stranger to wildfires because of the temperatures in the winter and the dry summers, making it one of those flammable places on Earth. California is unfortunately the target for some of the most relentless and intense wildfires that the country has ever seen. And some of these fires are pretty recent. These fires are exceptionally fast and they leave devastating damage. In the past, wildfires have ruined hundreds of thousands of acres and thousands of homes. People have lost their lives, and unfortunately these wildfires show no sign of stopping. The firefighters and their resources are stretched to their capacity, and sadly these wildfires have become, the norm. If we don't do something about it, these wildfires could potentially wreak havoc on the entire state, and if we're not careful, they pose a huge risk of becoming mega fires that can threaten both human lives and the ecosystem as well that we depend on really heavily. And you know what? It's gonna get a lot worse before it gets better. A super eruption explodes in at number 9 on this list. Do you guys remember how much the Yellowstone supervolcano was in the news? Well, the threat of that erupting has nothing on this other supervolcano in Indonesia. The Lake Toba supervolcano is located on the island of Sumatra. This is where the largest volcanic lake is on Earth. Its last eruption was 74,000 years ago. It is estimated that around 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcano ash and lava were pushed into the atmosphere, and guess what? It might erupt again, like pretty damn soon.
75,000 years ago on the Indonesian island of Sumatra, the supervolcano Toba erupts, sending the entire planet into climatic chaos.
If this thing erupts, the amount of ash and sulfur dioxide produced will have an enormous effect on the climate. But the fun doesn't stop there. Toba is located on an island that is home to over 50 million people. I mean, this is an island I never knew about, and it has more people than Canada. Canada has 30 million. Well, 50 million people are going to be vulnerable if this thing blows. Oh, and it's also about 40 kilometers from the Indian Ocean, so it can cause catastrophic tsunamis as well. And the scary thing about this whole thing is that there are literally nothing that we can do to stop it. How do you stop a supervolcano? Climate change will reshape the surface of Earth, and this takes us to number 8.
Studies suggest that a global temperature increase of just 3 degrees Celsius would displace more than 600 million people. The average global temperature has already risen a full degree in less than 50 years, and it's continuing to increase more and more rapidly.
I hate to break it to you guys, but climate change isn't just a theory or, fake news. The gradual rise in surface temperature here on Earth could literally reshape our planet. Our overuse of fossil fuels release greenhouse gases that interfere with the stratosphere, and as a result of that, instead of repelling heat rays from the sun, we are now trapping in heat, and we have a lot of evidence to support that. Our sea levels are rising, and we're experiencing extreme droughts, and all of those wildfires and severe weather storms are all the causes of climate change. So what will our planet look like in the future? Well, it's not going to be pretty according to this. Scientists who specialize in climate change predict that by 2050, so that's in our lifetimes, we're all going to be in a lot of trouble. There's a chance that human civilization could be seriously threatened, and that's if we don't do something about it now.
Headed on to our number 7 spot, we have another supervolcano, but this time we're headed into Lake Toba in Indonesia. The last time this supervolcano erupted was roughly 74,000 years ago, but it is said that the eruption was so devastating it almost wiped out humans entirely. To think that we could not be here watching this video right now is crazy. The reason that the volcano eruption was so devastating is because it is believed that after it erupted, it sent the world into an ice age, cooling some regions as much as 15 degrees Celsius. I would have thought the aftermath of a volcano would do the opposite, but I am very obviously not a scientist. While people who are actually scientists believe that we still have a while until a large eruption, the volcano's magma chamber is still very active. Continuing on in our number 6 spot, we have a potential phosphorus shortage. This is something I never thought I'd ever have to think about, but Alas. For hundreds of years there has been a worry of not being able to feed Earth's ever-growing population, and near the turn of the 20th century, this really came to a head because of the lack of nitrates and ammonia available. Luckily, the German chemists Fritz Haber and Karl Bosch were able to come up with a process that takes gas from the air and turns it into fertilizer. Problem solved, right? Well, yes, until we began to realize our shortage of phosphorus. Our bodies need phosphorus for things like moving around energy and to build DNA and cells. While we aren't going to run out of phosphorus tomorrow, we are about 30 to 40 years away, but the push for biofuel could push us even closer to the edge. This is really stressful because biofuel is so important and we need to start using it more, but then it will create this phosphorus problem. Hopefully our scientists will be able to find a solution for both of these problems and save us. At our halfway point, coming in at number 5, we have the thermohaline circulation and its potential shutdown. There are a lot of these cool built-in systems that Earth has that we don't even realize are happening around us, or at least I don't. Some of these systems, if altered, could create climate changes for centuries. Scientists have been warning us about climate change for years, and this is just one of the many reasons why. If the Arctic ice melts too quickly and the new freshwater spreads across the North Atlantic Ocean, it will shut down a looping global current that is vital to the Earth's climate called thermohaline circulation, or THC. Not that kind of THC. The THC is run off a mix of heat and density, and the circulation of it helps transport heat around the world. As an example, Atlantic surface waters warm up near Florida and then flow northeast towards Europe. This is part of the reason why London has a fairly mild climate, even though it's on the same latitude as the very cold Calgary, which is in Alberta, Canada, and also Kiev in the Ukraine. If the THC shut down, it could cause a sort of mini ice age. The THC has shut down before, so it is possible that if it did shut down, it would eventually be up and running again, but the worst case scenario is that a mini ice age combined with our already changing climate could be detrimental to the human race. Moving on to number 4, we have the potential of an asteroid hitting Earth. We all know, or at least have heard, that the dinosaurs were wiped out by an asteroid. If an asteroid were to hit Earth now, there is a good chance it would have a similar effect, but this time on humans. There have been dozens of asteroids that have nearly missed Earth, and a lot of them have been known and had their paths calculated beforehand to ensure our safety. But there also have been a lot of near misses that weren't seen until right before, or sometimes even after the asteroid had already passed. There have been 5 near misses in 2020 alone. In 2028, there's an asteroid called 1997 XF11 that will come extremely close to hitting Earth, but as of right now, scientists believe that it will miss the planet. If this asteroid were to hit Earth, it would be a mile-wide asteroid hitting Earth at about 30,000 miles per hour, which is similar to a 1 million megaton bomb, which would most likely wipe out most of all the life on Earth. So let's hope that doesn't happen, or Elon Musk can send us to Mars by 2028. Heading to our number 3 spot, we have a potential earthquake. Back in 2014, there was an earthquake in Chile that had a magnitude of 8.2. The earthquake was caused by the meeting of 2 of Earth's continental plates, the Pacific Plate and the Nazca Plate. But scientists believe that this earthquake could have been the start of something bigger. The previous earthquake was called a megathrust, and it was pretty bad. It triggered landslides, cut power, and created a tsunami, but it is believed that this earthquake only released 1/3 of the built-up tension between the plates. That could mean that an even larger, more deadly earthquake could be headed for the same area, and it is expected to happen sometime soon. Headed down to number 2, we have the potential for solar storms and a solar flare. The sun is the center of our universe and is one of the most important things for human life. The sun goes through its own phases and has increases and decreases in activity. When the sun is very active, it can cause a solar flare. A powerful flare can be accompanied by coronal mass ejection, which is a billion-ton cloud of magnetized plasma. While this sort of process happens sometimes, it is usually okay for us and we would never even know, but there is a possibility for it to be so huge that it really impacts us. What this could mean for us is that the electromagnetic pulses that are generated by it could cause terrible damage or even knock out most of our electronics. One of the worst times this happened in our recent history was in 1921, and it ended up knocking out the US telegraph service. But with how much technology we have today, if something similar were to happen, it could knock out many satellite systems, which would ruin all global communications, the internet, and even GPS. It would be absolute chaos if that happened. While we never really know what is going to happen, it is said that there is only a 12% chance of this happening in the next decade. I would prefer a 0% chance, but I guess 12 will have to do. And in our number 1 spot today, we have what is known as the big one. At the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, just off the west coast of North America, there is a subduction zone. A subduction zone is an area where 2 tectonic plates have collided and one begins to slide underneath the other, curving down into the mantle, which is the hot layer underneath the crust of the Earth. At this specific subduction zone, the Pacific Ocean floor is being pushed under North America. It is actually moving 40 millimeters a year, which doesn't seem like a lot, but that's kind of crazy. What's not so good about this though is that the upper part, or the North American part, is actually stuck and is being compressed, and at some point it is going to need to release all that built up pressure. This is where the big one comes in. The release of the pressure is going to be an earthquake, but it's going to be huge, with a potential magnitude of 9. This could potentially cause the coastal region to sink up to 2 meters and move horizontally up to 30 meters. After the shaking of the earthquake is over, it will be time for the tsunami. I'm not sure if you guys remember the 2011 earthquake that caused a tsunami in Japan, but they are saying that this one could be even bigger than that. And that is not to make the 2011 tsunami seem small, because it was absolutely catastrophic. Around 7 million people will be affected if this happens, from Vancouver to Seattle, Tacoma, and Portland.
Number 10. Black holes, incredibly scary, incredibly dark. And although that clip may not seem that scary, black holes are indeed terrifying considering what little we truly know about them. Not to mention, researchers believe there are roughly about 10 million of them in our solar system. I know our solar system is huge, but researching this, I didn't know there was 10 million of them coming for us. This is actual footage from the Hubble telescope in 2015. Black holes suck anything and everything in with their gravitational pull and emit enormous amounts of energy. No one even knows what's inside of one because, well, no one has been able to be sucked in one and come back to Earth and tell us all about it. So before we get into number 9, make sure you guys hit the like button on this video. It really helps us out. And head over to my Instagram at Atlanta Productions, because as soon as I get a hold of PlayStation 5s, I'm going to be doing giveaways. I'm going to try to get my hands on 5 of them, so make sure to go follow me at Atlanta Productions. And look for this contest picture and just tell me what games would you guys play. Alright, moving right along, number 9.
But you'd feel their effect if they were to hit the planet.
Okay, what is that?
Gamma ray bursts, or GRBs, are the most violent explosions in the universe.
So these things can happen when 2 neutron stars collide or when a black hole swallows one of the stars, but however it happens, life on Earth would not be able to survive gamma rays. Even just 1 second of these rays could do enough damage to wipe out the Earth. But luckily they're said to only happen in like once in every 10 million years. So the only question is, did one happen over 10 million years ago? Because are we due? Are we due for one? I don't think so. I'm hoping not. Next up, number 8.
The 1918 flu killed 675,000 Americans. 50 to 100 million people died worldwide.
Of course we have to throw this one on here. Well, pandemics are a serious way to wipe out the Earth. I mean, I feel like the Earth is being wiped out right now. A lot of us had a history lesson this year from the 1919 Spanish flu, and it's so crazy that 100 years later, it's happening again. And I'm not even sure if the Spanish flu shut down the entire world like how the world is being shut down today. I mean, when we're like 50 years from now, this is gonna be in our grandkids' history books. Absolutely insane that we're around for this. I mean, we were there for the 2008 recession. We're there for COVID-19. This is like a really hard lifetime, especially if you're from the 90s. We're going through a lot. And although most pandemics are said to be natural disasters, one thing this year has made us question is if this was a man-made pandemic. Is someone out there trying to control the population? Is biological warfare a real thing? Number 7, megathrust earthquake in Chile. This earthquake has already erupted in April 2014, and the results were absolutely horrific. It was an 8.2 magnitude earthquake that caused landslides and tsunamis to hit the coast. But the scary thing about that is it created the possibility for an even larger earthquake to erupt in the near future. This earthquake erupted near the Ring of Fire, which is where 75% of the world's most active volcanoes can be found. So when one earthquake erupts in this sensitive area, it causes faults to come under severe amounts of stress, and it can ignite other devastating earthquakes. So basically, if this same volcano erupts, which experts are predicting that it will do, we are going to be in a whole lot of trouble. There's going to be a lot of people, including myself, saying, is this real life right now? Mount Fuji eruption takes us to number 6. Mount Fuji is the highest volcano in Japan, standing in at 3,776 meters high, which is, it's pretty tall. And it is considered to be one of Japan's 3 sacred mountains. The last time it erupted was in December 1707. It is considered to be a dormant volcano, but we still have to be vigilant and continue to observe it, because if we aren't prepared for it, well, Mount Fuji could do some serious harm. If Mount Fuji were to erupt in the near future, it would hit areas that are at least 1,000 kilometers away from the base with volcanic ash. A Japanese government study warned us that as many as 750,000 people would be forced to evacuate the surrounding areas and Japan's transportation system, and that's due to the amount of volcanic ash that would interfere with the machinery. And if that's the case, people wouldn't be able to leave their homes or receive food or even medical attention. A professor also warned us that an eruption could happen by the end of 2015. So I guess we're long overdue for that one, because last time I checked, I think we're in 2019. So, but you know what? That actually terrifies me even more, because it means it's overdue. Just like the San Andreas Fault, isn't that like due any time now? Moving on to number 5, the east coast of the United States will be submerged. It's not even a question of will it be submerged, it's when will it be submerged. Do you guys remember Hurricane Sandy? Well, Hurricane Sandy, it hit the Caribbean, and it also hit up the East Coast in late October of 2012. This massive storm left thousands of people dead, thousands homeless, and millions without power. NASA said that Hurricane Sandy was a freak storm, and they predict a storm like this one will probably only happen about once in 700 years. But due to the current sea levels and the amount that the water is rising, it is predicted that the East Coast might be underwater by 2050. During a study, the rising sea levels have been going on since 1987, and they've been rising about 0.3 millimeters per year. That may not seem like a lot to you guys, but over time, it can be catastrophic. The sea levels on the East Coast are rising 3 to 4 times faster than anywhere else in the world. So yeah, New York City can literally be flooded by 2050, and this is a pretty popular theory. I guess you guys should visit the Statue of Liberty before it goes for a swim. Last time I was in New York and I tried to visit the Statue of Liberty, it was actually under construction, so I never got the opportunity, but something tells me I should go soon. Number 4, the largest tsunami ever. First, let me give you guys some perspective. Take a look at this picture right here. Could you imagine seeing this massive wave like coming towards you? You know, you're in the ocean and yeah, you see that coming for you. I don't know what I would do. Probably close my eyes and just accept fate, because I don't think there's anything that I can do. I would definitely look at it and be like, is this real life right now? And then, yeah. But sadly, this can be a harsh reality in the near future. Scientists predict that a volcano in the Canary Islands will erupt, causing the largest tsunami in recorded history. According to their calculations, this gigantic wave will travel at 800 kilometers an hour or 500 miles per hour. It will be 330 feet tall when it hits land, and it will reach Florida within 9 hours of being created. So if you're considering buying a condo in Florida, you might want to think again, unless you are a risk taker, which me, I don't know if I'd take many risks. But I did jump out of a plane and went skydiving. That's a pretty big risk, right? Devastating solar storms brings us to number 3. Yeah, that's right. One of the biggest disasters that could be facing mankind might not have even originated from our planet. This potentially fatal disaster could come directly from the sun. According to a recent study, there is a 12% chance that a major solar storm could hit Earth. But the odds could exponentially increase. If this happens, it would interfere with radio, GPSs, satellite communications. It would be pretty bad, which could also affect millions of electronics from around the world. And you know what? The fun doesn't stop there. Power grids would be out of commission, which means a worldwide blackout. I don't know what I would do without my cell phone. And if this does happen in the near future, it can cost about $1 to $2 trillion just in the first year of impact, and it would take us a very long time to get back to where we are. Now, in at number 2, a disease outbreak. We recently learned that the Earth isn't immune to outbreaks of deadly diseases. Ebola, the plague, mumps, measles, and scarlet fever could all make a comeback if we aren't careful. Yes, we have vaccines, but unfortunately outbreaks of dangerous diseases will soon be our new reality. Things like refusing to get vaccinated, lowered immunity, drug resistance, and climate change are all major contributing factors to this threat. And think about all of the other diseases that we haven't even discovered yet. Right now our population is about 7.53 billion, that's at the time of this recording, but it's expected to rise to about 10 billion people by 2050. I mean, a lot is about to go down in 2050. People are gonna need more places to live and food to eat, which means an increase in urbanization, population, migration, and killing off natural habitats and converting them to farms. So the potential for new pathogens to rise is something that will happen in the foreseeable future. All of the hand sanitizer in the world won't be enough to save us all. But as soon as an outbreak happens, I'm gonna try to attempt to buy all the hand sanitizer. And now topping list number 1, we have World War III. With the rise of terrorism, hostility between, Russia and the US, and conflicts in Syria and the Ukraine, well, these could all be the driving forces behind a potential World War III. I mean, just saying World War III is absolutely terrifying. Oh, and let's not forget about North Korea's strange fascination with nuclear weapons. So yeah, if we aren't careful, a full-on war has the potential to break out, and since our weapons are so powerful now with all the technology, they are more deadly than before. The world could literally be wiped out. Have you ever heard the saying, I don't know how World War III will end, but I do know how World War IV will start. It will start with sticks and stones. Donald Trump said that he wants to modernize America's nuclear arsenal, but we don't know what North Korea has up their sleeves or what kind of stealth operations are going on in Russia.
There are many things that could trigger World War III, but I hope those in charge of firing the guns realize what's at stake is way more important than an aggressive response.
Starting off our list are solar flares. Most energy from a solar flare is radiated away as ultraviolet and X-ray light. However, the intense energy of a flare can also heat up nearby gas in the sun's atmosphere, launching enormous blobs of charged particles known as coronal mass ejection (CMEs) out into space. Now, if that happens, radio and radar systems around the world can black out, and electrical grids may become overloaded and lose power, which would cause absolute chaos. Now, some experts fear that a sufficiently large CME could create an internet apocalypse by overloading undersea internet cables and leaving parts of the world without web access for weeks or months, which is such a scary thought. Long-standing blackouts could potentially cost America alone $41.5 billion a day. Not to mention, with the electrical grid down, the economy would be greatly destabilized. Now, satellites and space stations which orbit beyond the protection of Earth's atmosphere could also be debilitated by the renegade radiation of CMEs. Now, space weather experts at NASA and other agencies take this threat seriously and closely monitor the sun for potentially hazardous activity. activity. Next up, we have the Toba supervolcano. Lake Toba supervolcano on the Indonesian island of Sumatra is currently home to the largest volcanic lake on Earth, formed 74,000 years ago when it last blew in the biggest eruption for 25 million years. It is estimated that around 2,800 cubic kilometers of volcanic ash and lava were thrown into the atmosphere, and it may be about to erupt again. As with any super eruption, huge quantities of ash and sulfur dioxide produced can have a devastating effect on the global climate. But a number of factors make the prospect of a Toba super eruption much more intimidating than, say, one at Yellowstone. Toba is located on the densely populated island of Sumatra, home of over 50 million vulnerable people, and is only 40 kilometers from the Indian Ocean, in which catastrophic tsunamis would certainly be generated. Additionally, reports of volcanic gases and heating of the ground surface have led to suggestions that the volcano may again be waking up. Now, if it happened again, it would blacken the sky, send temperatures plummeting, destroy crops globally, and produce huge tsunamis. It would likely end the lives of millions immediately and many, many more over the course of a few years.
Our move right along in at number 7. Okay, what you just saw is a clip from a tsunami in Japan. This really happened. Tsunamis aren't anything new, but with climate change becoming more and more devastating to our home on Earth, if sea levels continue to rise because of ice melting globally, we can see a lot of our world underwater. It would definitely wipe out humanity, and the entire Earth would become a modern day Atlantis. And I don't know about you guys, but I can't hold my breath for that long. Like after 10 seconds, I'm tapping out. Number 6. Okay, you guessed it. It's an asteroid. I mean, not too crazy to think this could wipe out Earth, since it's been said to have been done before. You guys know about the dinosaurs, the dinos? Yeah, they were wiped out by an asteroid.
They now can't see what's headed their way, but they can feel it.
Number 5.
Right now, in the United States, one of the world's largest volcanoes is gearing up to explode. It's known as the Yellowstone volcano. And it's not just any regular volcano. Nope.
Okay, we all know that the Earth has many volcanoes, but there are some massive mountains that are ready to explode, and if they do, all of humanity would wipe out from the devastation. It may not be by melting everyone, but it would cause serious effects on our food crops, and it would block out the sun for several years. Is this real life right now? That would be an alternate reality. And moving along in at number 4, solar flares in today's world would seriously affect humans if one occurred again that was big enough. The last solar flare in 1859 ended up interfering with small-scale electronics. I mean, in today's society, we rely heavily on electronics for access. Think money to buy food, cars, news, media. I mean, we use it for communications. We use it right now to watch me. We could potentially be taken back hundreds of years to the dark ages and no way to Google ourselves out of it. I mean, a world without Google. I remember a few years without Google. Okay, no, I was too young, but I just can't imagine. Every single day, I'm asking questions to Google that I need answers to. Tonight, I'm going home and I'm gonna ask Google what happens if there is no Google. Coming at number 3. Okay, so this one isn't exactly a natural disaster, but I had to put it on this list because it is very, very possible. Nuclear war. Considering countries having nuclear weapons, this is a pretty scary reality. A full-scale nuclear war would kill hundreds of millions of people directly, and the aftermath would do irreparable damages to the Earth. Nuclear winter is when the soot from the blast covers the Earth and effectively freezes it over. But these are all theories, and I don't want to personally live through one to find out what would really happen. Number 2, the sun. Well, this one looks happy and cute. I mean, it's depicted as a little baby here. Can anyone guess what show this is from? Leave your guesses in the comment section below. But in all seriousness, the sun is not a baby. In fact, it's really old. It's hella old. And an expanding sun would be the most disastrous way for humanity to end. We don't want Mr. Sun to get any bigger.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's get ready to roast!
The idea of an expanding sun is that it grows bigger as time passes on. The sun getting bigger means it would be in closer proximity to Earth, which would scorch us. I mean, you guys remember this scene from the Terminator? Alright, in at number 1, take a look at this clip. Overpopulation is a very real natural disaster that we're kind of living through right now. It is estimated that the Earth will be home to 10 billion people by 2050. We will still be alive. I mean, 2050, that's only about 30 years from now. The problem and why it all puts all of humanity at risk is because the Earth isn't getting any bigger and we're using up resources faster than ever before. If we can't feed our population or house our population, I mean, we're gonna be in pretty big trouble. Especially if one of these pandemics happen again, human beings can sometimes be the real virus.
Humans identify the closest with the virus. We expand non-stop and we have no stable means of not destroying ourselves without expanding to a new planet. It is not a question of what we do, it's a question of what we are.